Hello, guys and gals, me Mutahar, and before somebody tells you to look between two characters on your keyboard, I'm here to tell you about something pretty wild that happened today. Ladies and gentlemen, do you know that TikTok is basically officially banned as of today? Now, you might not know this, but apparently the United States, out of nowhere, signed an entire bill package, a $95 billion package that was supposed to assist countries like Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, and inside that bill package was a tiny little provision for TikTok, where the bill said a provision will force the Chinese company ByteDance to sell the popular social media service TikTok. Now, TikTok's one of the largest social media services on the planet right now. I think it's something around like 110 million or plus something Americans use TikTok on a pretty daily basis, all right? You might have seen somebody on your subway just scrolling through video feeds and video feeds and video feeds, watching whatever slop gets thrown in their way. And to be honest, most social media services are kind of like that. TikTok is just the most aggressive version of it. Their algorithm is pretty good enough for people to sit there for hours on end, wasting their lives away. But then again, I guess most people waste their lives away on social media, so I guess it really is a brand of what poison you pick. Now, TikTok was a special brand of poison because it was the only social media poison that never originated from the United States that gained mainstream approval. To understand most of the biggest social media services in the world, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, whatever, all of that exists from right here, North America, okay? This part of the world controls a lot of data that, exists everywhere all around us. And for the first time in history, a foreign application from China ended up basically taking the world over by storm. An application, by the way, that's also banned in its home country. TikTok does not exist in China. They have something called Douyin, and if you think it consists of the same cancer that we have, no. Kids over there get fed a healthy diet of education. Kids over here get fed a healthy diet of, dangerous licks, okay? Devious licks, so to speak. So it's a different world, so to speak, but to give you an idea, to whittle you on back, the bill that we looked at last time, HR 7521, was known as the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary-Controlled Applications Act. Now, that's a pretty interesting sounding act, but a general idea is, it says, it shall be unlawful for an entity to distribute, maintain, or update a foreign adversary-controlled application by carrying out within the land or maritime borders of the United States. So that basically means if you're an app store like Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store or any Play Store or any type of application store on a mobile device or PC device or whatever, then you are unable to update or facilitate the distribution of that application, okay? This doesn't mean that you can't just download TikTok's APK file from a Chinese web server somewhere and have it running on your Android device. From my understanding, that is still totally okay because the website and server exist outside US jurisdiction. Yes, it wouldn't be legal for that country to interact with the United States, and I'm sure there might be safeguards at the ISP level to prevent that, but generally this basically kills an application, okay? If most people who have an iPhone, they can only get their applications in the US from the App Store. If TikTok is gone from the App Store, that means most people's access to TikTok is effectively gone. Now, when they talk about foreign adversary application, it means a website, desktop application, mobile application, augmented immersive tech application that is operated directly or indirectly by ByteDance, TikTok, a subsidiary of those companies, or an entity identified is controlled by a foreign adversary, a covered company that is controlled by any foreign adversary, and that is determined by the president to present a significant threat to the national security of the United States. So over the last few years, ever since TikTok's basics existence, a lot of agencies in the United States have said that TikTok can be risky. For instance, back in November 22, the FBI even alleged that TikTok posed a national security threat. Then one of the FBI directors here said they include the possibility that the Chinese government could use it to control data collection on millions of users or control the recommendation algorithm, which could be used to influence operations if they so chose, or to control the software on millions of devices, which give it an opportunity to potentially technically compromise personal devices. So this middle section is important when they talk about the recommendation algorithm. I think in this case, the United States says that there's a serious risk that, for instance, if you're having an election, right? Like an election is coming up, and the Chinese government wanted, say, one party to win over the other. They could use their recommendation algorithm to feed pro-propaganda for that party they want to win to at least 1/3 of Americans, right, in the country, because 1/3 roughly are using their application. That is pretty massive. And if you're wondering, Muda, couldn't the US government do the same to other countries? They most likely can, and that's where the hypocrisy comes into. But when you're dealing with countries of this size and magnitude, the US, China, Russia, so on and so forth, hypocrisy pretty much flies around like no tomorrow. I think this is a situation where the US government is actually a little pissed that they don't have a backdoor to this specific application. It may be a national security threat, don't get me wrong. I definitely don't discount it. There's been an issue even with other journalists investigating it, like Forbes back in the day, when they were looking at how TikTok allegedly spied on actual journalists from their organization. Now, all of this shit is incredibly shady, okay? And this is missing at least a couple more years of actual investigations and write-ups by security companies. So TikTok has effectively been thrown into the ban. Now, TikTok has come out and basically said, this is unconstitutional and we will challenge it in court. We believe the facts and the law are clearly on our side, and we will ultimately prevail. The fact is, we have invested billions of dollars to keep US data safe and our platform free from outside influence and manipulation. The ban would devastate 7 million businesses and silence 170 million Americans. As we continue to challenge this unconstitutional ban, we will continue investing and innovating to ensure TikTok remains a space where Americans from all walks of life can safely come to share their experiences, find joy, and be inspired. So to understand, it's kind of wild seeing a Chinese company talk about freedoms and the Constitution this hard, but they're effectively going to fight this in court. Now, from my understanding, and again, I'm no lawyer, but again, it's not hard to understand that this ban will go into effect in a year, okay? So roughly a year from now, you have to either divest the company, okay, meaning that you sell TikTok off to another company that is not a foreign adversary, so most likely either Microsoft, Google, Facebook, so on or so forth. If any company is willing to purchase TikTok and integrate the entire operation into their current business model. Or the entire operation is effectively banned. They self-ban themselves if you do not divest. Now, obviously, TikTok is a very valuable company, and people kind of forget the value it has in the entire world. Now, obviously, TikTok is banned in places already. I believe India actually has an entire ban on the application. So they already lost that massive market. Now, the United States is a seriously massive market that nobody wants to lose. So if the US bans it, there's kind of a weirdly healthy chance that other big Western countries actually start banning this shit. Could you imagine if tomorrow, like, Canada announces a ban? Could you imagine if, like, Mexico announces a ban? Could you imagine if, like, the EU starts announcing a ban, the UK? At that moment in time, this could be a giant domino effect that basically throws TikTok into serious harm. And even if they're going to fight this in the United States court, if they start getting banned in other parts of the world, do you think TikTok would be willing to, say, fight in the Canadian courts, in the European courts, in all these courts at the same time? It's almost like, hey, listen, either you sell it off to us or you leave our market and, you know, maybe potentially have to leave other markets in the future, or if you're willing to fight, completely bankrupt your organization to the point where you don't really feel like the money poured in is actually worth, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, right? That's kind of basically where things are at. And it's kind of funny watching the CEO for this company come out and basically talk about this to the TikTok audience. Again, it's wild that China, a country known for its massive human rights violations and authoritarian control, is now leveraging a constitution that is antithetical to itself in order to protect and preserve its application. Now, you might be wondering, wow, Muda, you must be happy watching TikTok and Skibidi Toilet get a ban. And this is where I'm actually not. I've actually maintained that having TikTok being banned sets an incredibly dangerous precedent. Look, we live in a free part of the world, okay? I might not be a Canadian, but I share a lot of similar freedoms that Americans have. But Americans really are the freest country in the world. If you think about it, one of the best benefits of the United States is being able to, I don't know, talk shit and criticize the president even, right? The sitting leader, the executive leader of a country. You know, you may not like a certain president, but the best part about the law is you can talk shit about them. You can talk shit about anybody. Could you imagine living in China and not being able to say anything negative about the current sitting president, prime minister? Could you imagine sitting in Saudi Arabia and trying to challenge what Mohammed bin Salman is trying to say? Could you imagine being in a part of the world where it is actually tyrannical? Americans don't have to experience that. There is freedom upon freedom upon freedom. And one of the freedoms is the ability to install whatever the fuck you want on your application. One of the scariest things to me, all right, is living in a country like China where access to information isn't freely available. You can't go to google.com in China and look up actual atrocities committed by the world. You can only look at a curated version the Chinese government wants you to see. And I feel like laws like this, however tiny and sometimes specific they are for preventing certain applications, sets a really bad precedent. I don't think that a government should be able to decide what you should and shouldn't install on your device, or what you should and shouldn't distribute from your own local servers, right? There are exceptions, obviously. Illegal material, the government clamps down on it. But applications and social media? That's kind of weird. And that sets a bad precedent. Today it could be TikTok. Tomorrow it could be another application from another country that suddenly gets deemed a foreign adversary. And for all of TikTok's issues and whatnot, it's never been a clear-cut situation that they have been actively spying on citizens. More so than any other country or any other application like Facebook has been spying on its own users. It's a weird precedent to set, and honestly, I don't really feel that good about it. I feel like it's kind of a way to inch yourself towards losing the freedoms that I feel people take for granted all the time. I really do feel that way. I feel like people take the freedoms that they are given in this part of the world for granted. That's really where I'm at. The freedom of your speech, freedom of having, freedom of being able to live freely and do what you want on your devices or your computers. I have talked about this stuff throughout the first video I've ever made on my channel. The first year I've ever made videos on my channel, I've talked about encryption, I've talked about security, I've talked about freedoms, I've talked about making sure that the world around you, the computers that you have, the data that you have, the world that you have is private, it's safe, it's secure, and ultimately, the internet is one of the last bastions of real freedom. And when governments and world leaders start dictating what you can and can't do on that internet, obviously outside of those specific exceptions, which are illegal material, as you know, that's a scary thought, but that's the world we live in. So TikTok's probably going to end up fighting this for a long time. And if you are a TikToker out there worried about, shit, what am I going to do a year from now when the ban goes into effect if TikTok doesn't divest? I think because of ongoing legal proceedings, this might end up being a situation that takes several years to happen. But if you are a TikToker primarily, I'm looking at you, Miles Morales, the NPC guy fucking losing it lately, might want to start switching to YouTube Shorts. Might want to start switching to something your country is friendly with. But yeah, bad precedent and all, ladies and gentlemen. This is me, Mutahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.